What if everything that tried to hold you back actually became the very thing that propelled you forward? My guest today didn't just overcome adversity, she built a blueprint from it, and then she shared it with the world. Jourdan Hathaway grew up in extreme poverty, but from those hardships came something extraordinary, an unshakable drive, a genius for human connection, and a career journey that took her from going door to door to fund her college education, and we're going to hear about that, to the C-suite of a global ed tech company. And today on this episode, we explore what it truly means to build a legacy, not just how you want to be remembered when you're gone, but the impact that you choose to have right now. Jourdan, welcome to the Life Fulfilled podcast.
Oh, Bernie, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being with me today. I'm excited for our conversation. And I know that you are prepared to tell us how your childhood hardship actually became a career superpower for you, what it looks like to intentionally reinvent yourself at every stage of life, and why decoupling achievement from fulfillment is one of the most important things that you do as a high achiever. And your project FLAT, which is an acronym, we'll learn about that, how it's transformed you from a VP of marketing into a C-suite operations leader. We've got a lot to cover in about a half hour. So Jourdan, if we could, I think we should begin at the beginning. Tell us that backstory.
Well, like so many others, I am somebody who is a byproduct of a very different beginning than where I currently sit today. So when I think back to my beginnings, it really goes back into South Florida, born into a very low socioeconomic. Of course, I wouldn't have used those words. I would have said many different words, but I grew up in extreme poverty. And I grew up in a home that most often didn't have electricity or running water. I was constantly being shut off and lived a life of continual evictions and trying to find other places to live. And those are my earliest recollections of what my childhood adversity started off like.
So at some point, you had some experiences that really sort of transformed your mindset, your attitude, your really what I understand, Jourdan, to be your approach to life, including your drive. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So in this growing up state, of course, I was exposed to other students that were, in my elementary school and looking at the clothes that they wore, the slumber parties that they were planning for, or birthday parties and presents, and even the backpack or the lunchbox that they would have on the first day of school. One of my earliest recollections of shaping the way that I've approached life was after school, I would often go to what I would refer to as a safe house. And it was a place that I could go that I could always sort of count on to have a lunch after school. And one of those houses had a TV that was always stuck on just one channel, no cable or anything like that, but it was a show called Bewitched. And Bewitched, for those who are too young to know what that is all about, but it was a show that featured a nuclear family, and it was really centered around a wife who had magical powers. She was a witch, and the father of that show was an ad man. He was in advertising, and every single episode was all about his pitch of the day that he really always sort of fumbled, and his wife would come save the day. Now, in my little impressionable mind, as a very small child in elementary school, what I was seeing with this show every single day is that there was a car, there was a Christmas tree, there was a home, there was dinner on the table every day at 6 o'clock, there was a pool, there were birthday parties. And what my mind started to do was associate the advertising field and marketing field becoming an ad man. An ad man meant that you could have a safe home. Of course, I wasn't putting those puzzle pieces together in an eloquent way, but it started to plant this seed of mine that if I could just become an ad man, that I could create this family that I so desperately wanted to have. And the feeling of safety and satisfaction and laughter and joy, and where the everyday worries seemed a lot less egregious than the worries that I was having at that particular time in my life.
So it sounds like that gave you some inspiration and it gave you some drive and motivation. So, and you're sharing a story, Jourdan, from childhood, right? So as you were growing and maturing in your youth, I'm sure you realized that to become an ad man, of course, you're a woman, so I know what you mean by ad man. It's generic. Um, how did you get there? I mean, doesn't that require college? How did you go about that chapter of your life?
So one of the things I really understood very early on was that education was the out. For all the dynamics that I saw around me, the families that I saw thriving had a common thread that their parents had these secure jobs. And to get those jobs, I knew that education was going to be very important. I remember so vividly thinking, I have got to get good grades so that I can go to college. I had no clue how I would afford college, but I knew that scholarships would be available and other support may be available. So I remember this one episode where in Bewitched, once again, they had to do a fundraising exercise. They were raising funds for something. I don't even remember what it was, but they were fundraising. And I thought, well, maybe I could go door to door fundraising as part of my ability to gather money to go to college. And as silly as that sounds, I remembered that seed being planted early on. And I remember in Bewitched, time and time again, there was the art of storytelling. Storytelling is this recurrent theme that would often happen in the show, whether it was the pitch or some other flavor of shenanigans and navigation, but storytelling was a really integral part of the show. So I was really focused on getting good grades. And as I progressed into high school, then I became acutely aware that college was inaccessible for many, many students without support and without need. So one day I took 11 by 17, like legal pad, one of those old yellow, you might remember them. And I took a pen and I just wrote my story. And my story was all about how I wanted to change the trajectory of my life. And I wanted to go to college and I wanted to give back and be a contributing member of society, but I couldn't quite do that. And I thought I could convince them by telling them what I had grown up in and having a copy of my report card. And so I went door to door to my local optometrist, the local dentist, the local deli owner. I even remember it was in South Florida, the Freemasons of Miami, having no clue what that building was or what solicitation laws were, by the way. And I actually used this tactic quite a bit, even in elementary school. I remember going door to door selling my homemade perfume because I was trying to raise money for back to school clothes for myself.
Wow.
And those different habits really sort of ingrained inside of me this ethic to say, well, if you don't have it, try to figure out how to get it. So I not only did that, I got, of course, academic scholarships and different scholarships that were available by taking the time to write to every single one that I can find at the local library. We didn't have the internet as easy it is today to find scholarships. And what happened is one by one, I started getting, checks and offers, and coupling that and having a job and having the scholarships. I remember packing up, my car that I bought with the last $5 in rolled nickels, by the way, if that tells you how expensive my car was, $1,500, and packing everything and going to college. And that's how I ended up going to college. And to me, what was the most important thing that I did is after that very first quarter in that first semester with my report card, I wrote every single one of those people that gave me money. And some of these we're talking $100, $500. And I would write to them that I've made good on my promise. I am becoming an ad woman, an ad man. I'm continuing down the marketing and advertising track. And here's a copy of my report card, my first report card, straight A's. And if you would consider continuing to sponsor my journey. And so, of course, I wouldn't have known it at the same time, but I'm creating a loyalty and retention program. And so I started to really start to see the power of relationships, of vulnerability, of storytelling, and of resilience.
Jourdan, a few thoughts here. First of all, anybody listening who doesn't have chill bumps right now is multitasking and should just focus on your story because it is one of those stories, Jourdan. It's a chill bump evoking story. It's really heart-wrenching and immensely inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. And so, and by the way, a little bit of a tangent here. I am of age. I watched Bewitched. Is my recollection correct? Was it Darren and Samantha?
Darren and Samantha. There you go. I owe my entire marketing and advertising career to Darren and Samantha.
Yep. Darren being the ad man, Samantha being the witch. Although witch is kind of a bad label because the connotation is, someone.
She was magical,
mean and nasty. Where she was
magical in the most
she was magical and sweet and friendly and fun, and also entertaining, kind of fun. Anyway, so fast forward to today. You are in the C-suite. You're chief business officer at General Assembly, which is a global talent and upskilling company online. And the story that you just shared is just, again, so inspiring. And one of the things that I said to you when we had our prep call for this conversation, and I remember how you reacted, and that is, I said that upbringing, that background gave you an unfair advantage because of how it instilled in you such a strong sense of resilience and motivation. So I'd love for you to comment on that, the fact that you have an unfair advantage based on that background.
I remember watching a commencement speech, and it was from a very, very successful person. And they said, one of the things that I hope happens to each of you is that you endure insurmountable hardship at some point. And you might be flabbergasted to hear me say that, but the only way that you can really, truly build grit and resilience is by navigating that which seems impossible at the time. And I really think there's a lot of truth to that. Now, I could not recall growing up ever thinking anything I was experiencing was an advantage. But as I look back, I realize how instrumental and how calcifying it was to how I approach life today and how much of a catalyst it was. There's really only two directions you can take when you grow up in odds that way. And there's so many of us. You do one of two things. You repeat the cycle and you continue to be in the landscape of which you're familiar with and surrounded with, and you mimic the behaviors that you see all around you and think that I'm destined to repeat this life. Or you somehow find the grit and courage to say, no, this is not where I'm heading. And even though I don't have the resources, the capital, the experience, or any of the advantages in front of me today, I am not taking no for an answer. I will find my path forward and I will keep going no matter what lays out in front of me, because I will change my trajectory. And I think that is an unfair advantage that I can see today, because there's so many obstacles that any business leader, anyone has in their day-to-day life. And I'm able to contextualize challenges in such a different way, in such a different lens, and to break them down into digestible chunks to figure out a path forward. They just don't break me down like what they could have had I've not faced a lot of adversity.
Yeah. The way that I would characterize that, and you actually alluded to this a little bit earlier in this conversation, you used the word figure out. And I love the phrase that something, and in this case, your scenario, going to college to become an ad man, was figure outable. And you
I love
did.
that.
You figured it out. You didn't say, you didn't take no for the answer. You didn't say I can't do this because of my circumstances. You said it's figure outable, whether those are words or a word used or not, but that was your mindset. And again, it's so inspiring and so chill bump evoking. Where I want to go next is, Jourdan, you know that on the Life Fulfilled podcast, my whole platform is based on what I call the 5 life pillars of fulfillment, that every single one of us that has a beating heart, that we're all seeking fulfillment across these 5 life pillars: health, fitness, career, relationships, and legacy. We'll get to legacy. I don't want to go there just yet. I first want to talk about something that you speak about, and that's decoupling fulfillment from achievement. What do you mean by that?
Bernie, I've been working on this for the better part of 4.5 decades. And it is one of the critical aspects of wisdom, not knowledge, not intelligence, but wisdom that you can ascertain. I remember achievement being my North Star for a very long time, because I thought if I just get straight A's this quarter and the next quarter and the next quarter and the next quarter and the next quarter, then and then only will I have a measure of success. And I remember one time I got a B. One B in my entire high school, and I thought my whole life was over. It's funny to look at that now and
Right,
laugh about that
right.
now. But that B becomes a different barometer of success. And so as you know, I fully go on to graduate and become an ad man, ad woman, right? I have all the milestones of achievement. And what I realize is every time you do that, the goalpost just goes to the next thing, right? So I never found that I could ever really rest in satisfaction when it was all wrapped up in achievement. I'm proud of my achievements, but it was not what really satisfied me. And when I think about a moment that really satisfied me, what comes to my mind are guttural belly laughs when I'm with my family watching stand up and I'm so immersed in this communal experience of laughter that everything else just kind of fades away and I'm really present. And that's when you start to go, okay, there are aspects of life that are completely separate from the title, from financial security, from whatever other barometer you're using for success, that ultimately leads to the satisfaction. And when I wake up today, and as I have for many years as I've been working on this, I wake up today so satisfied and decoupled now from what my title is.
Okay, that's interesting, because there's alignment, but there's also some semantics in play here that I'll just comment on, Jourdan. So I say that fulfillment is different than happiness. Happiness is the emotion we experience associated with some kind of a circumstance. It can be any circumstance where we experience happiness. Fulfillment is different because I say that fulfillment is connected to either achievement. We've achieved something. It gives us that sense of fulfillment. Satisfaction is kind of a synonym for it, but also fulfillment can be connected to purpose, right? So if you wake up every day and you have purpose, even on a bad day, you still are doing life in a fulfilled way, because what you're doing it with purpose. So
Bingo.
I say it's a deeper emotion. I also say, Jourdan, that fulfillment in most cases is immutable, because again, it's usually associated with purpose or some great achievement. For example, simple example, completing your college education, getting your degree, that fulfillment that you achieve in that moment, at that, that accomplishment, that's immutable, Jourdan. Nothing can take that away. And that's what I mean by fulfillment, is it's something that we either achieve or we do with purpose. And so it's immutable. So I think there's a lot of alignment there. Any comment on that before I move on?
The distinction that I'm really underscoring with you is take the example of the degree in this case, their certificate. For me, the fulfillment in that was not just, great, I stood up to class, I did the test and I got the degree. Check the box, I'm on to the next thing. The fulfillment came with, I accomplished what I set out to do, and I'm able to change my trajectory as a result. And it is something, those who train for a marathon and they cross the finish line, whether they're the last person or the first person, the work that they put into practice every single day has such a deep-seated fulfillment that comes along with that accomplishment. So I absolutely agree with you. And I do wake up with such a meaningful purpose. I work in workforce development, and that is so uniquely tied to my circumstance of seeing what economic mobility can do for a person and changing the legacy around them.
Yeah. In my world, when I teach a workshop, I always put a lot of preparation, even though I've got baseline content, I still prepare to tailor it for the participants. So on the other side, when I've completed it, that sense of fulfillment is just immense. So I can completely relate to that. Okay, let's move on to flat. I want to hear about what it is, why you created this thing you call flat. I know it's an acronym. What is it, and the impact that it's had on your life and career?
Yes, Project Flat. So when I was, I guess this was a few years ago now. Well, it was a few years ago now. I was vice president of marketing, and I found myself in what I thought was the dream role for me, which was in marketing. And at one point, I realized that my scope of responsibility was going to change to a COO, Chief Operations Officer, which sounds incredible, right? Finally made it to the C-suite. Only Bernie, I did not wake up as a marketer and go, oh, good news. Now that I'm a COO in title, I speak CapEx, OpEx, EBITDA, financial terms. No. I did not speak any of the language of finance. And so I authored my own professional development plan, and I called it Project Flat, Financial Literacy Advancement Training. Why did I call it that? Because finance seemed at the time so intimidating to me, so foreign to me, so unfamiliar to me, that I needed to create a system for myself, A, to make it interesting, and to hold myself accountable to it, and because I'm a marketer, so, I market things. Even if it's to myself, just to wake up in the morning and say, today I've got to do Project Flat. There's something a little bit more interesting about that as my calendar invite to myself than just financial training. So what I did is I did not know that I was creating this, plan that I would later share. What I started was identified my gaps. I started to say, I have to own my own professional development. Nobody is coming to me to say, Jourdan, here are your skills gap, and I need you to, do X, Y, and Z. And then and only then will you be ready for the opportunity that is in front of you today. Just like when I was younger and at every other stage in my life, you reach a crossroads and opportunity is there and you've got the choice. Do you say, I'm not ready, I'm not ready? Or do you say, I'm not ready yet, but I will get there. And it is, to use your words, Bernie, figure outable. So I do the figure outable. I do the work. The most important part of the whole thing was networking like crazy along this learning journey and then applying my learns along the way and letting other people know what I was working on so that I could come to them without fear of embarrassment or fear of exposure. You think you get to these executive levels and you're supposed to have it all figured out. Guess what? You don't. And this is that's maybe one of the biggest aha moments about being with other executives is that everyone has a gap or a skill that they need to work on. And so the most important part about the figure outable aspect is surrounding yourselves with others who have been down that road before, where that subject matter is table stakes for them. It is what they eat, sleep, live, breathe, so that they can impart that knowledge, that applied knowledge, and work with you. And then, of course, at the end of the day, you pay it forward, with your own domain of expertise. And so that's what I started doing. I did, a whole professional development plan. It was all just written in a journal, just like I've been doing since the third grade, writing in my journal. I would write when I would bomb a meeting. And I would use terms incorrectly, and I would apply the wrong thinking, or I would mix up terminology, or maybe I was reading the P&L incorrectly, and I would just own it. And then I would hold a meeting with that person, And I would say, listen, I know that in this meeting, I didn't capture this and this correctly. Help me understand where I missed the mark and how I can apply it differently next time. They would explain it. The next time I would have that meeting, and of course, I would be in a much different place. I would go back and thank them and let them know that that knowledge that they gave to me, I applied, I used, and it was helpful. And I think people love to know that they're providing value to others. Everyone wants to feel valuable. And that's a really important through line time and time again, as I think back to all these pivotal moments, is not only acquiring the knowledge, but really connecting with those that are helping me level up in that area, and then reinforcing what their influence and their impact is on me time and time again, human to human. And I think it means a lot for both sides.
Yeah, that's terrific. I don't think I can recall, not that I've seen every episode of Bewitched, but I don't know that Darren ever talked about EBITDA in any of his ad pitches, right? So
exactly, Bernie, exactly. It's why I didn't know it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but again, more inspiration from your story, Jourdan, about how you really figured it out on your own and created your own program for you, but then of course, sharing with others, which leads me to the topic of legacy, right? Because legacy is about impact. I often say, and this is something that I cover again in my workshops, legacy is not just about how do you want to be remembered, but it's about the impact you can have today. I know when I shared that with you, you gave me a big head nod. So elaborate on that and what that means to you.
Yes. Well, when I think about legacy, I'm not thinking about just what people will say about me when I'm gone. My driver every single day since elementary school was who I can be to myself and to everyone in my microcosm in a very impactful and meaningful way. And as I've leveled up in every domain of my life, wanting to immediately turn around and help others has become such an important part of my purpose and my mission and my satisfaction. Bernie, you said something a little bit earlier where you said, Jourdan, you've really figured it out on your own. And what I will say is I have figured out that I am responsible for my path forward, but there is not an ounce about my lot in life that has not been a byproduct of others investing in me and helping me. So that is so important for me to turn around and do the same thing to others. And the legacy that I have today is I want to, show my family and my kids that you can reach this executive level, and you can also show up to orchestra concerts every time that they exist, and you can have the things that maybe I didn't have, but you can also instill a little bit of grit and resilience by saying, you're going to have a job and you're going to be able to learn these lessons so that you too can grow the muscle of problem solving on your own. Legacy for me is so important because every single chapter that I have overcome or I have navigated has been all so that I can create a safe, loving, joyful, purposeful environment for myself and for all the people that I mentor and influence and help and assist. And that shows up in so many big ways, from my open adoption to the people that I mentor, to how I show up as a leader at work, to any of the organizations that I'm a part of. It's as important to me as anything else that I do.
Well, Jourdan, your story again is very, very inspiring and really just gives us all so much to think about. Not the least of which is the value of overcoming struggles, and for you that started at a very young age, but that really it was kind of a catalyst for you to really figure things out. And I love your point about how when I said you figured it out. Obviously, I didn't mean that literally as you figured it out on your own, but you drove it like you were the quarterback. That's the metaphor, right? You quarterbacked your scenario, your life, and then you went out and made it happen. You found the resources. You didn't wait for them to come to you or for them to find you. You went out and found them. And I just think your story is just so inspiring and so enjoyable to hear. And you know what I see all over your story, Jourdan, is fulfillment. And maybe I'm clouded because I'm all about fulfillment, right? But I see that in your story, like everything that I've heard you say. And I often say, Jourdan, I often say that even though when I look in the rearview mirror of my own life, I didn't use the word fulfillment often to express what I was experiencing or feeling, but that's what it was. And that's kind of what I'm sensing from your story, that you have tremendous fulfillment in many areas of your life, whether or not you choose to use that specific word.
Very, very fair assumption. It's a very fair assumption. And being able to even hold two paradoxes at the same time when you're in maybe a state where not everything is working out, but to say, I believe that I can quarterback the change that's necessary to get over whatever this hurdle is. I have inside me the ability to navigate and weather hardships. And the joy and the satisfaction and the purpose that you have when you're on the other side of that and can leverage whatever learns you have from that chapter that are resonant with somebody else who are going through a similar circumstance, to be able to use that to help somebody else out of that is a really, really fulfilling and worthy life. It really is. So yes, I'm so happy that I've reached a place where I'm fulfilled and I'm happy. I still have so much more to do. And you know, I even at this stage, I go, okay, here's the next bunch of things to have figure outable. Hello,
Yep.
AI transformation.
Yep.
But yes, it's a wonderful place to be.
Fantastic. Well, Jourdan, where would my listener go to connect with you and just learn more about you and get into your world?
Bernie, there is a U in my name that I bet you didn't know. If you're just listening to this, it's Jourdan, Jourdan, Jourdan with the U, Hathaway. So jourdanhathaway.com, where it's where you can find me, or on LinkedIn, Jourdan Hathaway. That's Jourdan with the U. I would love to connect with the audience and listeners.
Fantastic. Well, Jourdan, Jourdan with a U.
Jourdan with the U.
My listener knows that all that would be linked up in the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much from the bottom of my fulfilled heart for joining me on this episode of the Life Fulfilled podcast. Again, your story is so heartwarming. And I want to leave you with this thought, Jourdan. I wish for you a continuation of a life filled with belly laughs.
Ah, I love that.
That's my wish for you.
I'll take it. That's the best wish I can have. Love it.
Thank you so much, Jourdan.
Thanks for having me.